I was asked a question a few minutes ago about how are we going to know where we're sitting if we leave and somebody else comes back in here. And so I'm just going to suggest, because there are probably going to be some people that register and just come in that didn't hear the first part of what we were talking about. So if you just leave like something where you're at with your name on it or something, put it in your seat so that somebody that's coming in new won't sit where you're at. I mean, that's all I can say about that. Our next speaker is, excuse me while I get this pulled up here. His name is Eugene Rosengert. Mr. Rosengert has been working in the dental lab industry since 1996. He began as a dental assistant and later became an in-house laboratory technician specializing in removable prosthetics. Mr. Rosengert's education includes an associate's degree and certificates in dental laboratory or dental assisting and radiology. He is also currently finishing a degree in denturism. He has published several peer-reviewed articles on the subject of removable prosthetics and currently lectures in the United States and internationally. Mr. Rosengert has been a member of the Dental Technicians Guild since 2013. He currently resides in Sandy, Utah, where he owns Apple Dental Laboratory, LLC. Y'all, let's all welcome Eugene Rosengert. Eugene, it's all yours, buddy.
Hi, thank you very much. 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 I'm getting that echo in my headphones. Well, nice to you all, and thanks so much for coming here and spending your time with me. Hopefully, I can give you guys some useful information. I couldn't be there in person because of current situation and everything else. But we do have a unique today because my computer will be able to show you a little bit better the aspects of data that I utilize in my laboratory. And recently, I got my license as a denturist in the state of Oregon. I'm finishing up my boards, but I have been doing stuff as well. And this is where the marriage analog really comes together for me. A lot of really interesting things that come through and that are coming very useful in the lab as well as the clinic. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen here. And sorry folks. Do this quick right here. Just like that. And open up. There we go. So hopefully you guys can see me. All right. So the very first time that I started getting into not just digital printing. I've had it for a couple of years, but I've started really getting things from the laboratory until about a year ago. In August 2019, this was my very first 3D printer. I got it for like $250. I just got it just to try things out, how 3D printing works. What are resins, everything else. The amount of ignorance stuff was just tremendous. So I started doing things and I started feeling I couldn't figure out what was going on, and my prints wouldn't print. The sizes would change, and whenever I got something already printed, and all of a sudden it would warp either right away or sometimes down the line. So I realized quickly that just push a button and you're ready to go kind of thing. It does take a certain amount of knowledge we do in our practice. And oftentimes I hear just one-sided stories. Digital is wonderful. You can do pretty much anything. It's really easy to learn, and there's nothing to it. And then I hear, the opposite side of things, like analog is the only way to go. This is how it's done. It's how it's always been done, and there's no need to waste your time on something like this. But in reality, I'm kind of in between both things. I think digital is a wonderful instrument. And just like any instrument, unless you have a knowledgeable person using that instrument, it's not going to give you any good results. I'll give you an example. We had this patient, and we needed to create a custom tray. In order to create a proper custom tray, as many of you know, you need to have a good initial impression. If you don't have a good initial impression, the custom tray itself is not going to be good, and then the final impression is not going to be good, and then the base plate's not going to fit well, then you're going to have to adjust things, and so on and so forth. So you have to start from the beginning. You have to have good analog skills to do that, unless you're using an intraoral scanner. So we took a good, nicely overextended impression with frame cutback tray and double alginate technique. When you have one alginate you inject and the other alginate that you're loading the tray in, and then went through all the proper steps of boxing up the impression, pouring up the impression. As you can see, we have all the anatomy that's present. You got the retromolar pads, everything else. You got the external oblique ridge. Yeah, you're pushing things out onto the mucosa because that way you can tell where things begin and where things end. Okay. Once that is done, we're utilizing our knowledge of anatomy to give the proper outlines of the custom tray, and then you can design this in analog. I've been doing analog for years. I've been doing these trays for years by hand, or you can design them digitally and print them. In this case, and this is what we did, and this is where digital really shines. If you use all your proper analog techniques or digital techniques, and you get things designed, the fit of these custom trays or base plates, they're more comparable to, I would say, a process base plate rather than a handmade one. So when you fabricate things, and you go to try it in, it actually works out really well. Let me just exit here because it doesn't want to play for some reason when I have it in presentation mode. But if you look right here, hopefully it'll show up. Sorry if it's taking a little longer. Come on, you can do it. Okay. Okay, so it starts out in English and it switches to Russian because the patient doesn't speak in English. Hopefully you can hear this. This is the suction we were able to achieve with just simply utilizing a custom tray. This wasn't even a final impression. We were joking about this. You could have just taken, the custom tray, cut off the handle, and set the teeth up right on there, which we could have done actually, because this was a digitally fabricated file. We could have, reused it for something else, but we decided to take a final impression, just a wash. There was no border molding, nothing else done, and switch it to the bi-trim. So to me, this is where it really, really shines. And there's many other aspects that I utilize all the time nowadays. Before being able to print things, before doing things digitally, I did, a few duplicate denture techniques, but usually it was, time consuming, and it required things on the clinical end from the doctors that I was working with. They need to do the, some kind of flasking technique, or using, I don't know, a denture holder or a soap dish we have been used. So it became a bit intensive for them. But now for the clinics that I work with that are in near vicinity, one of the clinics is University of Utah General Practice Residency, program that I work with. So whenever the patients show up, I get a phone call, and I'll just stop by and pick up patient's denture, bring it back to my lab, scan it in real quick, and just send the case back to the clinic. Or, more and more dental offices are acquiring intraoral scanners. I get scans in all the time of dentures that you can just work with and do whatever needs to be done. And I'll show you guys some of the stuff here after the presentation. I'll go into my programs and we'll kind of go through all the steps. And that's why I kind of like the whole idea of us being sorry, I got a message that the audio has been fixed, so I'm going to put my headphones back in. I got a message that there we go. So what I do now is just print them. Instead of going through the whole flasking process, injecting acrylic and everything else, I print them. Is it more expensive? Yes, absolutely. It is definitely more expensive. Resins cost money, and equipment that is associated with it definitely costs money. The scanners are not cheap, and then the printers, you can buy cheap ones like that $250 one, which I pretty much no longer use anymore. At this point, a year later, I already have 3 printers in my lab that I'm utilizing on a daily basis. But you print this, and you can take a wash impression, mount that up, and you have a lot of things going for you right there. You have a good custom tray or a decent one. You have good bite registration possibly, or at least a vertical. So you can do a lot of things from this point. You can maybe do an initial setup. You can do maybe bite rims. You can do a Gothic arch tracer. All of these things can be done digitally, as well as they can be done in analog. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be doing it. All I'm saying is that you have options. Okay, and this is what I do a lot of times nowadays. Whenever I create bite trims, if the patient's been a dentulous for long periods of time, or a patient has an unstable bite, I can incorporate into my base plates a Gothic arch tracer. Okay, since it's going to be the same model, all I do is on the upper, I'll create a wax rim. I can create one for the lower as well. But on that same model, besides the wax rim, I'll create a plate with a tracer, with a tracing plate, sorry. And on the opposing, I'll create either with a plastic screw, or I've incorporated metal ones as well here, the tracing pin. If you have a bite, that makes it a lot easier. But if you don't, and I'll show you how I do it usually, it still can be accomplished. But if just in case, I'll include like a metal plate in it. So if the angulation is off, you can clinically correct the plane of occlusion, so you can get a proper centric relation for these kinds of patients. And it has been a godsend, to be honest with you, because nowadays we just kind of go through this whole protocol and go, you know what, this patient's bites all over the place. What are we going to do? And all I have to do is just create one of these and send it together with a bite rim. I don't even have to be in their chair side, because usually when we did the Gothic arch tracers chair side, I had to be there with a clinician before and show them how to mount it properly. Now it's already pre-mounted, and then they can do all the clinical steps themselves fairly easily. Okay. Another thing that I utilize quite a bit nowadays is printing models for duplicates. Before having a reliable printer and good stable resin, which is a key, because even if your printer is printing things really well, but if you don't have a proper post-processing protocol, if you don't cure it properly, wash it properly, there's a lot of things involved in it. Things can warp, but once you get things dialed in, you can use fairly inexpensive resins for your model work, because it doesn't go intraoral, so it doesn't have to necessarily be dental. So what I do now is I'll print a duplicate. So let me just explain to you my whole process. Usually when I do partials, I don't ever process on the master cast. I'll process on the duplicate and fit to a master cast. Some people will process in the master and fit to a duplicate, but you know, um, I think both ways actually work fairly well. It depends on how exact the duplication is. If your duplicate's not that great, then either way you might have issues. But in this case, what I'll do is I'll scan the master cast, I'll print the duplicate, and I will process on the master cast, and then I'll fit to this duplicate. And once I got the process dialed in, it goes really quick. I don't ever have to mess with silicone. I don't have to mess with hydrocolloid, because I used to use hydrocolloid, but I didn't like the having to run the machine all the time, or I didn't like melting it in a microwave. I just didn't like the results of hydrocolloid because I wasn't using it often enough. And then when I was using it, I wasn't using it properly, and I was getting not such great results. So I switched to silicone, and with silicone, I was getting good results, but it took a lot of investment also, and sometimes it took a little bit to set. And with certain types of silicones, if you duplicate it, you can't pour it up right away because it will actually start releasing hydrogen gas because it didn't catalyze all the way through. And then if you pour up that model, it's full of looks like sandpaper pretty much. So you had to wait like 24 hours. And it's not cheap either. So with this process, it works out fairly well for me. But the key is to make sure everything's nice and stable. Okay? And same thing for flippers. And I think it looks really great this way because, when you send the case back to the dock, and it's on a nice model like this, and it's got a nice contrast to it, it just kind of gives it added value, I almost think. And it doesn't really take a lot of, because these models are not solid. These are just shells. They're about 2 millimeters thick, and they're hollow on the inside, which is actually better because they can cure all the way through and prevents warpage and stuff like that. Okay. And here's a little trick that I use. Whenever you have models like these, and usually when you're finishing them up, they're going to look kind of iffy because you're polishing them and everything, and they get really scratched up. And really easy way to fix it is just a little lip balm on top of it. You just rub it on there. It shines it nice and great. And it does leave a greasy feel to it, but then all you do is you just wipe it off with some alcohol. So what it does is alcohol will remove all the superficial layer of the lip balm, but the crevices are still going to be filled with the lubricant, and it will look really, really presentable. And you can actually do that not just on models. You could probably use it on printed appliances or prostheses as well, because lip balm is a food item, right? So it shouldn't have any problems with it. Technically, I haven't tried it yet. Okay, here's also where it really, really shines. Like I said, you can do all of these things by hand, but the amount of precision you can get with this kind of protocol and the amount of time that you can save doing this can be very substantial. This particular case was a CONUS case, and once the bars were fabricated, I needed to create a cementation jig. So when the doctor was pushing on the bars or a patient was biting on it, it would create even pressure all the way through. So in this case, the doctor was pushing on the bars. So these cementation jigs right here, these two, goes right over the bar and allows the doctor to press on it. So the fit is almost telescopic with these prints. Okay, once that is done, we have a custom trace that you can take an impression. As you guys know, with CONUS, once you pick up the bars, you got to take a new impression so you can have your final impression. But then I was able to make bitrims that would fit right over the bars as well. And I would also made Gothic arch tracer that fit right over the bar. So all of those had a telescopic fit. So I was able just to take one file and resave that file and redesign everything step by step by step. And within a day, I had all of this done. Usually this would take me a lot longer. And I don't think, even if I had the time to do this, I don't think I could have been able to create such precision by hand. because I don't know about you guys, but I always end up over blocking stuff because it's just I'm so worried about locking stuff in, and it just kind of end up using too much wax. I guess it comes with experience, and I just haven't reached that point yet. So in this instance, it creates a really nice addition to my armamentarium in order to get good results. Because when you're specializing in not just removable prosthetics, but if you're specializing in implant supported restorations as well, this really comes well into play. Okay, but you start kind of branching out a bit. You start bringing other things into it, and you start looking for other solutions. You don't necessarily have to use just set protocols. We're technicians. We're problem solvers by trade. So whenever something comes, it doesn't matter if you're doing it by hand or you're doing it digitally, you start looking for new solutions. So this came in, this model came in. So patient has a severely proclined anterior teeth, which will be extracted for an immediate denture. But the doctor had a really hard time obtaining an impression because of this situation. And they requested a bite trim for this particular case. And we looked at it, and it had some issues. This area here was not impressed at all because of the inability to adapt the tray very well. And we had some issues right here. So we could have done one of two things. We could have just said whatever, right? Or we could have maybe retaken the impression and did the bite. But because of the whole COVID situation, and especially with University Hospital, the patients have to get tested every 2 weeks when they come in. So this would have pushed them out another month or so. I don't even know how long it would have taken. So I came to come up with a certain type of solution. So we decided to make a base plate, which you could do a wash impression with, and you can also take a bite. So you would take a wash impression first, make it nice and stable, and then you take your bite registration, then take the bite registration off, and then take a pickup impression over the top, which we do quite a few times, and a lot of people do it this way. But the other thing that we decided to do, because we obviously had issues with the position of the teeth and getting the tray over it, we need to do a section tray. And before, I've done section trays by hand, and they kind of sucky, to be honest with you. And I don't do them very often. But here, what I was able to do is actually just scan that bite trim with a model in, and then design one part of the tray, and then the other part of the tray. So you design the first part of the tray, and you save the design, and then you import it back in, and you design the second part of the tray on top of it. Okay? So if you look right here, you got part one of the tray, so the bite trim is underneath that, and you got the secondary part right there. And I actually also, if you look back here, these are actually magnets that I embedded into pattern resin right with the tray. So you could have a nice magnetic interlock and still able to rotate the tray a little bit so you're not impinging anything. So you can see right here. Okay, so this is, as you can see, this right here is alginate, and this is polyvinyl. So the blue stuff that you see showing through is adhesive. So we applied adhesive, placed it intraorally, had the patient occlude into their bite. So we actually reduced the wax first, so the patient could bite properly. Then we took a wash impression in occlusion. Once that was done, we did a bite registration, took the blue mousse out, and then took the one portion of the tray and did the alginate impression technique. This is two types of alginate. The orange is the ejectable one, and the purple is the Hydrogun 5 stuff. So once that was done and set up, we filled the anterior portion with polyvinyl. And instead of just placing it like we do regularly, we actually kind of went from forward direction. And it all kind of locks together. Yeah, the borders are a bit bulky, and we realized that was going to happen because we can't really muscle trim this case. But we did get all the periphery that we needed. I mean, we have good vestibule, and we have really good posterior palatal region. Yeah, there's some minor bubbles in there, but they're not going to affect anything. So now you're able to box it up like you usually do. And then this is how I box up all my impressions. You know, you use a magnetic boxing ring, and I'm using, you can either use a product that's specifically designed for this, or you can use Play-Doh, or in my case, I'm using stuff called R-Time dough. Okay, and once you pour everything up, just make sure you don't take off the base plate until you mount the case in. As you can see right here, the base plate still has the wash impression underneath it. So from this point, you can mount this with face bow, you can mount it with stick bite. We actually have a stick bite here. And that allows you to proceed with the case. So by utilizing digital protocols as well as analog protocols, we're able to save time and get a better fit. Obviously, if this was me, if I was the patient in this situation, I would definitely get those teeth extracted first, because they're not doing anybody any good, especially at the time where everybody's wearing masks. I think the aspect of, you know, embarrassment and everything else can be easily avoided. So if this was me, I would probably get those teeth taken out first, heal up completely, and then take an impression, because at that point you can get a really good functional impression, and you can get an aesthetic try-in done, and you can really easily verify your bite and your aesthetics and everything else. So that's just my opinion. I'm not a big fan of immediate dentures, period, but I realize they're a necessity, and they can be good if all the steps are done properly, but it's always a crapshoot, right? Here's just a side view. All right, and we do digital dentures as well. You know, this particular case here is a new Vigo by Vita. I use Vita teeth pretty much exclusively in my lab. I'm using usually use Excels for my premium workflow and all my implant cases, and for my economy work, I've been using MFTs. But this is something new and exciting that I've been working with it a little bit. And what I like about this system, it's got quite a few options. So this particular case is actually printed, but don't look for this printed base anywhere, because it's not manufactured. I actually took a printed resin, and I've adjusted the colors manually by adding different pigments, because I wanted to see if I can get one that's going to look more natural. So the way that it's designed is that the actual teeth are just like a carded tooth, except they come in like a bubble pack. And the teeth are have all the undercuts removed, and they're actually sandblasted already. So when you design a base, you can print the base and you lute the teeth in place with a bonding agent. And the spacer is like a 20 micron between the tooth and the base. So they're really, really precise. I did run into an issue early on with this when I did the setup. Once I printed the base plate and I put the teeth in, my bite was actually open, I think around 2 millimeters or maybe even 3 millimeters. And the issue was actually a dual complication. Number one, you have to make sure your printers are dialed in, because if you don't have your printers dialed in, that's going to offset things. And by offsetting things in certain regions, you're going to increase your bite or decrease, depending on which way you're going. And also, when I installed my library, there was some kind of corruption going on or some kind of glitch, and that offset things as well. So I ended up actually taking the library out and reinstalling it again, and that kind of solved it. So whenever you see things like this, you have to kind of investigate and see what happens there, because otherwise you won't be able to get a good product. So this is the bond that you use. So you mix the two portions together, and what you do is you just barely wet the tooth and you barely wet the actual saddle, because the spacing is so minimal. You don't need to put a lot of stuff in there. And you can actually have your bases pre-polished before you bond anything. And you just put that in and hold it with your fingers, 8 to 10 seconds. So technically, you can be holding it with one hand and prepping the other area of the other tooth while you're holding that one, and just go tooth by tooth by tooth. And then once that's done, you go ahead and place it in a pressure pot for about 20 minutes, like 2-bar pressure, and that gives it a final cure. And if you don't want to do that, you can just let it bench cure for 12 hours and it will achieve the same result. And according to the company, the testing they've done is like really superior. So that is it. And because you can see right here, I did a cross cut of it. These are the Vigo teeth, and they can be set up in lingualized occlusion, lingualized according to Gerber. You can set them up in semi-anatomic as well as in crossbite, obviously. Okay, and it gives you all these options in the software. And as you can see, the fit's pretty close. And these are actually not even glued in; they're just dry fitted. Okay, so you can get some decent results. I mean, granted, I'll be honest with you. I actually, went in with it after it was printed and did a lot of stuff here by hand. But overall, it looks good. One thing to be aware of, it is a printed material. So besides having possibility of distortions in curing or post-curing protocols, there's also the added issue with staining. In general, a lot of printed materials will stain fairly quickly. So I haven't used all of them, obviously. I've only tried a couple. And, they're all kind of different. And some showing a lot more promise than the others. I think within the next couple of years, they're going to have some really, really decent results. The other option is obviously milling the bases, which is going to be a lot more precise. Well, maybe not as precise, but it's definitely going to be stronger, and it's going to be less problematic, because when you're milling an acrylic puck, it's just like processing a denture. There's no difference in material-wise. It's same acrylic. So the staining is probably going to be the same, if not less, because it's a lot denser. But however, the cost associated with milling is obviously higher than printing. And if you're doing production type of work, these are all the things that you have to consider. Okay, here's just another view on the model right here. I mean, you can get them looking pretty nice. But like I said, this is not an actual resin that I was using. This is an actual resin that's made for intraoral use. And this one's made by Dreve. And as you can see, you got a bit of a translucency around the necks with this one, which can be an issue for some. However, I generally, most of my high-end stuff, I customize anyways. So, and with digital, it's actually a little bit easier to customize, because you can take your base file and you could do the reduction digitally before you will print it. So you have the room to actually go back in and customize this with composite, which I do on 95% of my higher end cases. Okay, so that is one possibility. And also, I think over time, if not already, you'll see bases that are going to be more aesthetically, opacious and everything else. Okay. Let me see if there's any questions. No, doesn't look that way. All right. So one of the things that I've read into with printing bases. So whenever you have a situation where you have a close, how should I say it? When you don't have enough room to place a tooth. Usually when we do it by hand, right, you just end up grinding the tooth, you set it in there, you wax it in. Well, with this particular situation, it doesn't really work out that great, because if you have a hole there and you try to lute it together, it's going to be an issue. And you can't really reduce the tooth beforehand because it's not a printed tooth. So this is one of the reasons why I utilize this third portion of this protocol. And I think it has a lot of potential, in my opinion, because you can print these base plates not necessarily out of definitive material. You can even print them out of custom tray material. NextDent has a custom tray material that's pink in color. Just like when we do regular base plates, we use custom tray material as well. So whenever you have a situation like this, I use it as a reduction jig. So if you put the tooth right in there, wherever it shows through, all you do is you just kind of grind on that side, and I'll just lute everything with wax. And I'll do a regular try-in. And if you want a little bit more leeway, you can increase that space gap for the glue, make it a little bit higher, so that way you can rotate the teeth a little bit if you need to. Or you can just open up those sockets by hand if you need to do so. And that way you can do your setup a lot quicker too, because once you kind of get accustomed on how to use software, you can get your setups done quicker. I am not quite there yet. If it's a simple, class 1, yeah, I can go through it fairly quickly if I don't move a lot of stuff. But if it's class 2 or class 3, excuse me, then I'm not quite there yet. And the software is getting better every day, and a point can be made. If you don't start doing it now, you're going to be kind of behind once it's becomes more prevalent. But I wasn't a fan of digital for many, many years, and I just had to be the right time for me to start getting into it. That's all it is. So I'm not about to start pushing anybody out, because I know those guys quite a bit who are always going, no, you got to do this, and you got to start doing digital stuff. And I think unless you're comfortable with it, it's just it's not going to do you any good. So I will reduce the teeth on the basal surface, and I'll do a regular try-in, and I'll do regular processing, because those teeth can be processed regularly. So you have several options. You can either print a base, you can mill a base, or you can just print a try-in like this, or you can print a monolithic try-in. The only thing is, when you're printing monolithic try-ins, it's going to be a noised output. So the occlusal and the incisal edges are going to be the same, but the facial and the buccal surfaces are going to be kind of out of focus. So they do it this way so you don't mill your own teeth or print your own teeth, just so you can buy the carded teeth, I guess. So this protocol is a fairly good one, I think. Okay. So one of the major things that people have been kind of talking about with carded teeth is the aspect of doing a single arch. And people talked about it, and we talked about it with companies, and it's always been an issue that we're trying to address. And this is the solution I came up with. Let's say, for example, you have a case like this where you have a full upper denture. This is not an actual setup denture. This is just a duplicate. But if we have a situation like this that was set up with Vigo teeth, let's say, for example, and you wanted to kind of grind in the occlusion properly, and you can't do that digitally because you're not dealing with a digital tooth, you're dealing with a carded tooth. So how do we get around that situation? Well, let me just kind of show you. Sorry. I'll kind of go back and forth on this particular thing. So what I did is I took took the mounted models, as you saw right there, into Mesh Mixer, and I brought in a wafer, just a piece of something in here. All you have to do is you have to make sure it's a solid object, and you have to make sure the density of triangles on this solid object is higher than the density of triangles on the denture teeth, because removing a slightly dense object from a more dense object is easier, because the triangles will kind of form around it. But if you have bigger triangles, it's not going to line up as well. So I make it a solid object in Mesh Mixer, and I'll just do a Boolean difference of both arches. And as you can see right here, whenever you move both arches, did I do both arches or just one? No, both arches, yes. Whenever you move both arches, you see the opposing right here, just kind of pushing through that wafer. And this is going to be your occlusion reduction jig. So when you print your base, at the same time, go ahead and print this. So when you set the teeth in there and cure them, you can just pop that thing on there and just adjust your bite. Okay, you might have to do a little bit more intraorally, but the majority of it's going to be done right there. So there's your workaround for utilizing single arch restorations that we were kind of shining away from before. Okay, now let me go back. The reason I showed you this particular case is another thing that we've been doing lately that has helped quite a bit with diagnostic stuff and everything else, just kind of like a smile design from the smile design aspect. So a doctor sends me a scan of a patient's existing denture. And I said, you know what? She likes some aspects of it and she doesn't like others. Can we do a new setup and kind of keep certain things? So he sends me the scan and he sends me a high-end, a high-resolution 2D picture of the patient, not a facial scan. And this is the steps we usually take. So I'll take the scan of a denture and in MeshMix, I'll reverse it and I'll create a model from that. So, and then I'll bring that and the opposing and the denture into the 3 shape, okay? As you can see right here. So this was the denture, this was the model, and there's the opposing, okay? And from this point, we can do a new setup. So we can move the teeth forward a little bit, move them back, move them side to side, do quite a few little things to it. And we can change libraries. I'm not sure this particular setup was done with Vigo teeth, but nonetheless, it's the protocol that I'm showing you. And as you can see right here, yeah, this Candelar's teeth. So I can line up and I can move things around. You see right here it was a little canted right here, so the canine was a little bit lower. So we evened out the smile line with using the patient's eyes right here. And then you can print something like this and do a try-in, or maybe you can take in even the wash impression with this and go in that direction. Or just simply by using this, you can solve a lot of problems. And what's great about these particular cases, usually, whenever I do a setup by hand and the case comes back and they're like, okay, move the midline 2 millimeters to the left. And I always hate when people say that because a lot of times clinicians don't realize the amount of work it requires to move the midline to the left 2 millimeters. It's a pretty big undertaking. It's doing a full reset. But with something like this, you can just open the file back up and just move it 2 millimeters to the side and print a new base. So that's quite a bit nice. So there's a lot of pros to the system. Yeah, there are downsides, obviously, as with everything. But I think when you use things for some and maybe not for the others, you can really get a lot of things going for you. Okay. And I showed you guys this already. This is the case that I've been working on actually just now, literally yesterday. So this patient comes in. Sorry, let me get a drink of water. This patient comes in and he has an existing set of dentures. And our protocol nowadays, if we have an existing set of dentures, if they're not too horrible, which we'll try to take a scan of it and duplicate it and utilize it for a bite trim and for a custom tray. But in this case, I looked at it and the whole back area was missing. So this is going to be kind of a big issue. So what I actually did when I was scanning it in, I actually filled in the back area with putty to approximate it. And then, as you see side by side, the 2 scans. So we actually printed this one. So the whole facial was gone, everything else. This is the actual what his denture kind of looks like. I kind of overdid the polishing here a little bit. But we're able to get a stick bite and a good reline impression on this case. So I mounted everything up, and these squiggly lines that you see on the casts, they're markers for scanning. It makes it a lot easier to orient the models in the software afterwards. So what I did is I scanned that in. I scanned the upper as a wax up. So I don't utilize 3-shape scanner. I'm using a DLF scanner, so it's a little bit different. If you're using like a 3-shape program with a 3-shape scanner, it's a lot easier because it kind of tied in together. but my scanner is different, so I have to scan it and then import the scans. So I scan it as a wax up. So what it does, it tells me to scan the upper with the denture, and I do that. Then it tells me to scan the upper without the denture. So I'll take the denture off, carve in the post dam, and scan the model. Then it tells me to scan the bite. So I'll put the denture back on there, and then I'll scan it as a bite on the articulator. And then I'll scan the lower opposing without the denture. Okay? So when I bring it in, it looks something like that. So you have your lower, you have your upper, and you have your wax up. You don't scan the lower wax because you don't need to, because the lower was just for the bite registration. So when you bring that in, this was already, you see how it carved the post dam already. When you bring that in, you can do the setup. So one major issue that I usually see with lower duplicate dentures, and I've been at fault myself for this, a lot of times the lower dentures will not have the retromolar pad regions in them. So when you take a wash impression or a reline impression of that, you're not going to capture the retromolar pads. So you need to look at things like this, and you need to realize there's a deficiency, and you need to build up the deficiency. So usually in situations like that, not in this case, but if I have a deficient retromolar pad region, what I'll do is I'll use some compound and build that up, or you can use some of those, thermal beads that they make for border molding, and build that up, and then take the wash impression. Because if you have a deficiency, you're not going to have a good impression, you're not going to have a good base, you're not going to have a good denture. So you need to address those things. And if there's a lot of deficiencies, maybe it's good just to start from the beginning, okay? Because if you look at things and you go, you know what, I have a problem here, maybe you should just take an alginate and start from that point. Because if the denture is 60% there, 70% there, it will work. But if it's not, then you probably just should start from the alginate stem. Okay. And this is the wax up that you did, and then you just order the teeth and print the bases, stick them in there, and you send them for try-in. Okay. Or you can do, a printed try-in, and you can even do like a printed try-in with a Gothic arch tracer altogether. Okay. So this is what I wanted to show you in the presentation, but I want to also go into the actual programs and show you some of the things that I do and how they're done. Does anybody have any questions before we start? No? All right. So let me close this up. And I'm going to open up program called Mesh Mixer. So this is a free software. I mean, a lot of you guys probably already know this, but this is for the people that don't. This is a free software. You can just download it online, and it does a lot of things for you. It can help you out quite a bit. So what you do is you import the file that you're going to be using. So in our case, let's say we're going to import an upper denture. Okay. Let's say a doctor scanned in this denture, and they're sending that in, and they're like, okay, let's do a couple of things here. So if you want to create a model from this denture, this is how I usually do it. What I'll do is I'll use my selection tool, and I'll switch it to a lasso option. It doesn't always work right away. I might have to do it a couple of times that way, but ever since I reinstalled it, it's been working a little bit better. So the thing with Mesh Mixer, it doesn't like a lot of things, and sometimes it'll just crash on you. So that's something to be aware of. So I just go on the outside of the denture as close as to the peripheral roll as possible, and you'll see here in a second why I do that. Okay, I'm not really good at drawing things, so just bear with me. I'm doing my best, and I've drank a lot of coffee this morning, because just like every other technician, I had to pull an all-nighter just to get things done. There we go. I'm just outlining everything right there. Maybe a little bit too much, but it's okay. All right, here we're just going to go right to the edge right there. As close to the edge as possible. Right there. And if you do it right, it will highlight everything, okay? So what you'll do is you press two buttons. So the first button you're going to press is going to be first two keys. I mean, you're going to press O on your keyboard. That's going to optimize your border. And then you're going to press B, which is going to give you, smooth boundary. And if everything looks good, you just press accept. Okay. All right. Now we want to keep this part, but we want to erase the opposing part. So what I'm going to do is I need to invert things on this denture. So if I go in and I'll go into modify and I'll press invert or I, so it'll highlight the other side of things. So now what I need to do is just erase this portion. So I'll just press delete on my keyboard. Okay, and it deletes that side. Okay, that side. Okay, that side. So now I'm going to press Control A and highlight everything again. And I'm going to go into Edit and go down and I'll press Flip Normals. So once I do that, it'll actually invert the inside of my denture. Okay. So it's looking pretty good at this point. You want to make sure that you kind of don't have areas where kind of overloops on itself. So if you look right here, it kind of does that a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my select tool. And if you go from here, you can kind of highlight that area a little bit. Wrap that around. And press these buttons again, O and B. Accept. And we'll delete that area. Okay. And we'll do the same thing here. Just carefully cleaning all these up. All right. And this area right here probably is going to be right there. And this area right here as well. Okay, probably not going to be perfect, especially because I'm rushing here. Okay, so once you get to this point, you need to create a base. So the way I create a base is you take your brush and you size it down to 0. Okay, a friend of mine actually taught me this technique not too long ago. Okay, and you go right straight to the edge where that blue highlight is, and you click on it, double click on it. Nope, that didn't work. Let me try it again. Sorry, folks. There you go. So it highlights everything around here. Okay, and you press the same buttons again. You press O for optimize boundary and B for smoothing boundary, and you press accept. Okay, once you've done that, then you press T for transform. You can see right there. And this L stands for local frame, W stands for world frame. So you switch to W, and what you do is you actually take the blue arrow and you push it down, just like that, okay? And you press accept. Right there. So now you have your model base. So you do is do what? You press edit and you do plane cut, because you obviously don't want that base to be that tall, right? And if you click on that green, and if you go all the way up to that little clock thing and you move, you can go right to 90 degrees. That looks pretty good, right? And you press accept, and you got yourself a base, okay? And that creates a solid base. If you want to have a hollow base, what I usually do is you go and press Control Z and go back. I'll go a little bit taller. Let's go here a little bit. Sorry, the computer is kind of going a little bit crazy, so I'll go a little bit taller. So I'll press accept. Okay, so at this point, we need to go, you see you have all these options here. And one of those options is hollow. So you press hollow, and what it does, it starts hollowing out the model. So it's counting all the triangles and everything else, and it's will hollow out the model. So see there, offset distance 2 millimeters, mesh distance, and everything else. You can see the thickness of the wall. If everything looks good to you, you press accept, and now your model is hollow. So what I do from this point is I'll go back again, and I'll go plane cut, and I'll go, where am I at here? Okay, I'll go again to 90 degrees. 90 degrees, sorry. Now go down. Come on. Don't want to overshoot things. It looks about right. And I'll press accept. So now you have your denture model, which is hollow inside. So if you want to, you can actually print this and use that for try-ins and everything else, okay? So if you bring your denture in, let's bring that in again. File and bring that in again. Upper denture. You see how it's taking a while to load? That usually means the file size is too large, and it's going to make it difficult to work with that file size. So what I'm going to show you guys is when that happens, what you guys can do in order to kind of make things a lot easier on yourself, so your computer doesn't freeze up and your program doesn't crash. But as you can see right here, you have your denture. You have your denture file, and now you have a model that fits that denture file. So when you bring that into 3Shape, you can bring that in as a as the upper model, and bring the denture in as a wax up, and you can just start doing the setup that way. Okay, so this is how I create models usually. With dentures, also a couple of things that I do. For example, if you want to do a, you have your digital file of a denture, of a base, for example, and you need to do a offset to layer composite. Usually when I'm doing an analog way, I will go in and just remove about 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter with a burr. But when you have a digital file that you're going to be printing or milling, it's actually a lot easier to do it like this. So you use the same selection tool, as you can see right there, and you use a lasso option instead of a brush. And you just select the area. Just going to roughly kind of go here. Oh, sorry, screwed up a little bit. You just select the area that you want to do the offset in. Usually I go a lot slower and a lot cleaner than this, but I'm just showing you guys kind of the idea of what I'm doing. Just so you guys don't sit here and watch me do this whole thing for an hour. So same thing, we press O for optimizing boundary and B for smoothing boundary. And then I press accept. And then what I do is you select, go into edit menu and you select offset. Okay. And then you can offset by a certain amount. So you can bring it out or you bring it inward. In my case, I'm going to be bringing it inward by 0.5 millimeter. Press accept. And as you can see, sorry, clear selection. As you can see, it offsets the base by that amount. So now when you print this, you can actually have perfect room and a really good boundary for layering composite. So when you're layering composite, it's really, really nice to have a nice, a butt margin, so you don't have overhangs. Because just like with acrylic, when you have these overhangs, you can't get that polished really well, and it also will delaminate over time. But with this, it just works really, really well. Okay. Another thing that I utilize the same program for is fabricating surgical guides. So a lot of times when I'm doing a all-on-4 type of restoration, or maybe a conus restoration, you need to use a duplicate denture technique in order to show the surgeon where the implants need to be placed, so they don't go through the access holes. So the access holes don't go through the, let's say, the facials of the interiors or buckles of the posteriors. So what we'll do is we'll make certain selections and we'll cut it through the denture. And I used to do this by hand. A lot of times I would duplicate the denture by hand, inject acrylic, and then by hand cut all these windows. And I'll be covered head to toe in acrylic powder because I didn't have a box and everything else. So it took forever. It was a dirty job, and it just not very rewarding, let's put it that way. So now I do these things digitally, at least part of it. I still kind of do the top reduction by hand because it's a little bit just easier for me to measure. But the windows I do digitally. So what you do is basically you go into selection and you click off to the side of things, and you kind of select the area you want the window in. And like I said, I'm going a little bit quicker here. And I select it like this. I don't usually do like the brush and select it that way, and I'll show you why. Because when you select it like this, it selects all the way through. Okay, when you do a brush, it just select one side. But now I'm going to use the brush to clean it up a little bit. So if you take the selection tool and you increase your brush size and you press shift and you do the left click on the mouse, it'll actually erase the selection in the areas that you have. Okay. And same thing right here. I'll just clean that up right there because I don't want to be erasing that stuff. Just like this, okay? That's a little too much area here as well. So let's say we want to erase this and here. Kind of like this. Let's make sure clean that up. Okay, so we have a fairly nice area that we're going to be erasing. Okay, so same thing, we're going to press O and we're going to press B. It's going to give us a nice area. I'm going to press accept. So now we have our selection that we're going to erase. So now that when I press delete, I have the opening hole. But if I close that hole by just doing my analysis and pressing inspector, it's going to give me two things. So I got this error, which is a simple one. But if I close these two, it's going to be a problem. See that? So this is not what I want. So let me go Control Z. So what I need to do is actually, a friend of mine taught me this. I need to bridge these areas first. But before I do that, I need to kind of smooth those boundaries. So I'm not sure if I remember this correctly. I just barely learned this, by the way. Edit, yeah. Smooth. Let's do this boundary smoothing. Okay, I guess that smoothed it. Smooth it 100%. Let's try that. Okay, and also we need to remesh everything just so we have normal alignment of triangles. These are the two things that are going to help us. So what is going right now is actually lining up those triangles properly, and will allow us to kind of see things a little bit better. And I'll show you what I mean by that right here. Do you guys have any questions for me? No, it doesn't look like there's any questions. Okay. This is kind of fun. Hopefully you guys are not sleeping over there because I guess I can't see you. Oh, I can see you. I have a really small screen here because I don't have a lot of space. I usually do things on that other computer when I do webinars, but because I'm doing CAD CAM, I'm on this one, so I have a really tiny screen. But hi everybody. All right. It's taking a little bit, huh? It's probably because it's a large file. I should have reduced the file first, and I'll show you how. Okay, so accept. It's going to take a little bit of time here. You don't want to push this program too much because it will freeze up on you. So the way you reduce the file, once you have everything highlighted, you go into Edit and Reduce. And what it will actually do is it'll just reduce the amount of triangles by 50% right away. And it shouldn't change anything in the appearance of the denture because it doesn't really change it that much. If you reduce it by a lot, then I'll just kind of lose all its texture. But if you reduce it by 50%, as you can see, it doesn't do anything. So, but it makes the file size that much smaller and makes it a lot easier for the program to work with. It makes it a lot easier to save and incorporate in the other program. So this is what we did. So now we can clear the selection. And if you press W on your keyboard, you can see the mesh size. And these are the triangles that you're using. Okay, so you can technically, judging by the size of these triangles, you could have probably reduced it another 20% and still be fine. But what you want to do is you want to bridge a lot of these areas so you can make sure these cuts are nice and even and smooth. So if I press select, I'll try to reduce the size probably to about right here. Okay, and you want to click on this area and the opposing area as well. And when I press Control B, it goes bridge, and it kind of bridges things together. And it doesn't work all the time, but by smoothing things out like this, it helps quite a bit. It doesn't throw an error as often, but it will still throw an error. It's just, I'm sure of it. Okay, so we've bridged this area. Now I'm going to do this area. And I'll press it. Yeah, see, fatal error. And I think it has to do with the fact that you probably didn't line up the triangles correctly. So let's try it like this. I think if the triangles are smooth, maybe this will work. Yeah, it will line it up. So there are ways of getting around it, but they're not perfect. But I'd rather press a few buttons a few times instead of just grinding on acrylic for much longer. There we go. So if you do, you have to do all four sides to make sure that it works well. Oh, man. So I'm pressing S, one S to deselect, and one S to select it back up. There we go. Like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but a couple of times into it, I'm able to get the results that I need. And let me just try to get this done so I can show you the what happens. I just need probably 2 more or 3 more areas and I should be okay. Oh. Probably one right here. Almost like it knows that I need it to work and it doesn't want to. So I'm pressing Control B and then pressing accept. And this is the last place I need to line up. course it doesn't. Let's try it again. Okay, so once that is done, I'm going to go into Analysis, Inspector, and it gives me these errors. And I'm going to press Auto Repair All. And hopefully it'll seal everything up. Sometimes it doesn't want to do that either, but in this case, it worked out pretty well. So let me press W again so you can just see what happens. And it actually closes up all these walls. So all I'm getting right here is just a little unevenness, which can easily be fixed by using the Sculpt tool. So I'm going to select the Sculpt tool, and I'm going to use this brush right here, Robust Smooth. And the strength, I'm going to keep it around 30, and the size about 30 as well. And depth's about, I don't know, 20 or so. And I could just go in and just smooth that out right there. Maybe I should increase the strength a little bit, because the smaller the triangle size, a little bit harder it is to smooth. It doesn't really want to smooth as easily. Just increase the depth a little bit maybe. There we go. It's starting to work. So that's how you pretty much smooth the whole thing. So from this point, you can go ahead and print it, and you'll have your nice area to where the doctor can place the implants. And you can do the same thing with this region, but for me, it's just easier to measure by hand at this point because I haven't figured out the easy way to do it in Mesh Mixer, which I will eventually, hopefully. Okay, so these are the major things I use the Mesh Mixer for, and this allows me to do quite a few things. What you can also do is you can actually do texturing of the denture. Let's say, you know, a lot of times you're not comfortable with using 3Shape for texturing things, or if you have a file that you just want to alter, you can use the same brushes. For example, if I use a pinch brush, and here I can go into these areas right here and just create my texturing. Really, really kind of subtle, or I can go more aggressive if I wanted to. See right there? Just clean up the areas in between. What I'll do a lot of times, because when you're scanning the denture in, for example, okay, a lot of times the interproximal areas right here are not going to be very visible or very clean. So if you're using the the pinch brush and the fall off, you can use this one, right? So the tip of it, and you just go in proximally, and you can clean up things a little bit. You know, don't be too aggressive, but you just kind of clean up these areas right here. Same thing right here. Just so you have a little bit better separation of things. Okay. If you got something like this on the teeth, go back to the smooth brush and just smooth that out. Same thing right here. Just cleans that up really easily. Okay, just be careful. Don't put the settings of depth too deep, or the size too big, or the strength for that matter, because you can go all the way through. You know, in 3Shape, it has an option to protect the underside. In Mesh Mixer, it doesn't have that. So when you're smoothing on that side and you don't want to mess with this, you got to make sure you're staying superficial. But in our case, you know, we don't really care for this particular thing. You know, and I'll smooth out these areas, obviously, just so the patient's comfortable. Doesn't cause any issues. These are usually clamps from the spray powder for the scanning. Actually, there's several different spray powders out there, and there's quite a few things off to market that people use. A lot of people use like athlete's foot powder, which doesn't work that great. It cakes up, and it's not that great to breathe in, obviously, also. Lately, there's been some research done on different powders, and believe it or not, the dry shampoo spray works really well, and it's actually what I use. And it shows really, really good results as well, and it's not very expensive either. So I think that's about it for Mesh Mixer. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. If I remember something else, I'll make sure to go back and show that to you. So let's just close that. We don't need to save this particular file. All right, so when we're dealing with 3Shape, obviously it's definitely a more robust program. It can be a bit more complicated. But so what I use a lot of it for on a daily basis actually is custom trays and base plates. I mean, like I said, when you're doing base plates this way and you print them, if you do the protocols properly, they are comparable to a process base plate rather than a handmade one, because the fit is superb. But if you don't do it properly, the fit's going to be just like a handmade base plate that you've left in triad unit for too long and it shrunk on the pallet, and you can stick your finger underneath it fairly well. So it's all about proper ways of making things. Okay, so let's try on this case right here. This is the case I actually showed you guys, but this is how I fabricated the tray for this particular patient. And it's actually, better not press design. Oh yeah, I have to press redesign. Sorry, it's been already designed. My apologies. Sorry. Okay, so when you fill out your lab script, and let me kind of show you what we did here. I'm going to go back and show you the lab script, how to fill that out properly. And a lot of these tutorials are already on YouTube and everything else, but I'll just kind of, since I'm here, I'll show you how it's done. So if you click on here, it takes you back to the RX portion, hopefully. There you go. So this is, you probably just need to select a single tooth, and you go in and you choose the customized impression tray, and you go in and you have to choose the material you're going to be using, because it comes as default. It comes like zircon or zirconia. But in this case, I used Dreva photodent base material and model manufacturing. Okay. So it brings things in, and it looks for the path of insertion. And usually the program will select the most optimal one. I generally don't change things unless I see something way off. So I'll just leave it as is. Just make sure these settings are here, and blockout angle, leave it at 3 degrees. I tried messing with that. If you do more than 3 degrees, the base plates are too loose. If you do less than 3 degrees, they're too tight. So 3 degrees is a perfect setting. So leave it as is. If you want to change the path of insertion, you just kind of set it to where you think is best, and you press set from view. But in our case, we're just going to leave it as is. Press next, and it's going to take us to the next screen. So the next screen is going to be, working with the model, blocking things out. And I've already kind of blocked things out a little bit right here. So as you can see, we got little deficiencies that I kind of worked on. So the program itself is going to block out the major undercuts. But if you look, and if you don't like something, like that area right here, for example, you can just use the smooth tool. If you use, this is on the left right here, just how much you're adding, and this is the size of the spot. So size of the spot is pretty good. I'm going to probably turn this down to about half, and just add a little bit of wax right here just to cover that area right here. Maybe some things right here as well. Okay. And we'll press next. And this is the outline that I did last time. So with custom trays, we have to follow. This is the mistake that I often see being made, and I've made this mistake for years. We'll go to school and they teach us, 2 to 3 millimeters from the vestibule. Yeah, that's true. However, where are you going to measure from the vestibule? If you measure right here and you cut 2 to 3 millimeters, it's not going to do you any good. You're still going to be overextended. So you have to go at the external oblique ridge. So I always talk to my doctors, and I said, listen, when the trays come in, they come in as a starting point. You can't just take them up and use them. You always have to muscle trim your trays. You always have to go in and check. Because from the upper, you're somewhat close. On the lower, you're definitely going to be off base. In our case, when you use your myostatic outline, when you know where your mentalis muscles are, when you know where your external oblique ridge is, your retromolar pads, your mylohyoid, all these areas, and you know that you need to be around here with your tray so you're not impinging on the mucosa, then you're going to be fairly close. For this tray, we barely had to adjust. We just adjusted right here, and we got suction on the tray. Okay, so you have your base thickness and you have your impression gap. If you set your impression gap to 0, it's going to be a base plate. If you increase it to the amount you want, it's going to be, in our case, I usually leave about 1 millimeter for the patient. It doesn't create tissue stops. It just kind of incorporates an away area for the tray. If you want to incorporate tissue stops, I personally do not know of the way. You can do this in 3 shape, but I'm sure you can do post addition of things in Mesh Mixer. So you do your 1 millimeter spacing for impression gap, and then you take that file into Mesh Mixer and you just mesh a couple of areas of stops into the tray, so it can be fairly easily done. I can probably even show you guys if we have time. So once you make an outline, you press next, or sometimes people press preview just to see what's going on, so they don't waste time on the processing, because if something's wrong, you're going to have to go back anyways, and it just takes an extra amount of time to get it done. So in our case, the outline created okay, but what usually happens is that you'll see here in a second once it loads. The tray usually ends up being shorter than the outline by a little bit. Okay. In my case, it already added the handle that I selected last time. So, but if you want to add a handle, so let's just delete this handle. You have to go into a group which you're going to be using, and in our case, we're going to be using customized trays group, and we're going to use a handle barrel. I really like using that one, and I'm going to press plus. And so you kind of approximately check where you're going to place it. So right about here for my case. All right. And you can adjust the width and the height and everything else with it. So this will make it narrower from that direction. I'm going to leave it like that here. And then I can also lower it a little bit, and I can change the rotation of it a little bit. Like this. Maybe bring that in a little bit. And move that. How do I move that forward? There it is. So that's looking pretty good. So that's the handle portion of it. And if you're doing a base plate, you obviously just don't do the handle. And as you can see, I was set at 1 millimeter, and it just kind of pushes it away 1 millimeter from the borders as well. And now I just press next. If you want to do perforations, like let's say, for example, if you're doing not a polyvinyl tray, but you're doing a tray for a space tray for alginate, or some people like doing polyvinyl trays for with spacing. So you just click on this perforation thing, and it just asks you hole spacing, hole diameter, and minimal distance to the border. So if everything looks good, if I press next, it's going to create, hopefully it'll create holes. I only done it a few times, but as you can see right here, so now we have holes where we need to. Okay, and now we just close, and that creates our file. And then in order to print our file, what we need to do is we need to right click on this and go into advanced and click on generate cam output. So what we'll do is we'll generate the STL file for us to send to our software, like slicing software for my printer, for example, to get printed. And I can actually show you guys how I do that as well. If you give me just a sec, what I'll do is I'll go into my folder for manufacturing shortcuts, open that up, and I'll just take that file and send that here, close this up. We'll rename this file to test print, for example, right? Okay. So if I open up my software for for my printer. I have two printers, Frozen Sonic XL 4K, and I have also a regular Frozen Sonic. So we're just going to use the XL just for the fun of it. Press apply. So we're going to go File, Import File, and we're going to go on Desktop. I'm going to select our test print. So we want to make sure that the sprues are not in the areas that they're going to do most damage, as I say. You know, if they're on the integral surface, it's kind of unnecessary, right? So we want the sprues to be on this area, or supports, not the sprues. So I'm going to rotate my model 180 degrees, like that. And you want your prints to be at an angle of about 35 degrees, because that's the most optimal kind of rotation for the prints. So if I go like this, and I'll rotate it to about 35 degrees like that, that's going to be the ultimate angle for the print. Okay. And I'm going to click L right here. It's going to give it to the low position for the print. I'm going to click support mode, and I'm going to click generate supports. And here I have a couple of settings I usually work with, densities and tip diameters and everything else. So it just kind of supports all the areas that are above. You see this crucial build angle, 35 degrees. So it kind of builds all of that up. Okay, and I'll just press this button and kind of unifies all the supports. And once all of this is done, then I'll just press play, and I'll go to desktop, and I'll select folder, and I'll say, okay, start slicing. So what it's doing, it's actually creating a bunch of pictures, slice by slice by slice by slice. You see right here? So for layer 4, 6, 7, 8. So there's this particular file is going to have 541 slices to it, and usually it goes a lot quicker, but because I'm using this computer for everything else, it's taking forever. But I'm going to just cancel a slice because we don't need to deal with this right now. And this is how you create the file to get printed, and then you just send it to your printer and go through all the steps to get that fabricated. Okay. No. Okay. So for our case that I showed you guys, that we did, sorry, this one. So the case, remember I showed you that had like the missing palette and everything else. This is the case. So let's I'm going to click redesign, because I already have it in there. And I'm just going to show you guys a couple of things that are associated with it, just so you kind of know what's going on and how it went through the whole process of getting this made. So I scan everything in, like I showed you guys. I scanned the upper, I scanned the lower, and I scanned the wax up. And when I was bringing that in, it was asking me, give me the scan for the upper, scan for the lower, and scan for the wax up. So the first thing you do is you bring that in, and it asks you for occlusal plane. And you can select it by points, or you can do it a couple of different ways, and you can adjust the occlusal plane any way you want. Let me see if I have too many things open here. Nope. It's just taking a little bit. I think this case is going to be a good case for you guys to ask questions if you want, because some of these things are going to take a little bit of time to load, unfortunately, just because we're utilizing the software on the computer, which takes up a lot of RAM, and as well as we're streaming at the same time, so it can be a little strenuous on our software and the computer altogether. I'm surprised it's this strenuous. Nope, no questions. We're just going to sit here in silence. Well, while that's doing that, let me kind of go through some of the aspects of things that I've kind of ran into problem-wise. So whenever you're doing 3D printing, thing you need to realize, you can't just arbitrarily kind of wing it because it just doesn't work that well. Let's say, for example, you need to do a post-curing process. There are many different, curing units out there that you can just buy on Amazon, but they might not be powerful enough, and your resins might require more attention than that. So I would definitely kind of look closely into the power settings and everything else. So I see a lot of people using like nail curing lights for their model works. They just simply don't have the intensity of wattage to get things done. Like my curing unit has 200 watts of power, something like this, which is not always good either because it can overcure and change the colors of things and get that done. I think this is probably froze up on me. Let me just go on to repress. How do I? Why does it keep doing that? Huh. I cannot. There's a possibility that's taking my. Yes, I want to close the Dental Manager. It proved to be too much for this dear program of mine. Still doesn't want to close. Come on. Wow. Let's try the Control-Alt-Delete again. Oh, man. I don't know what to do, honestly. Okay, questions are in the comments section. Okay. Ooh. Press B to smooth boundary. Bringing neat little feature, thank you. Bridging, yeah. Yeah, bridging is a great feature. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to look on this little screen. Actually, you know what? Let me just move this up here so I can see it a little bit better. Does the mesh layer need to be on to do this part? To do the smoothing? No, you can just for the bridging and everything else. No, it doesn't have to be on. It just helps me to visualize the triangles a little bit better, and allows me to see things when I'm selecting, so it doesn't look too rough. What resolution do I print at? I print at 100 microns. For dentures, you don't need anything anything lower than 100 micron, I think, personally. I mean, I print crowns, temporary crowns at that resolution as well, and have no problems whatsoever. So that works pretty well. Okay, let me try again. Nope. I knew I was going to have problems in here, but that's why I left it to. I don't know why it keeps doing that. have no idea why it keeps doing that. Let me turn this screen off. Maybe my second screen is not allowing it to do it. Oh, well. And I can't even go back to my desktop. See that? It totally froze. I have to do a hard reset, guys. Sorry. Unfortunately, I'm not able to proceed with that step. Oh, wait. Let me close this. Maybe this will do something. Nope. Nada. Oh, come on. You dirty little rat. Well, I think that sums up our lecture. If there's no more questions that I can answer, I think we're just probably going to end it right there. I will try to, if you guys don't mind, what I can do is I can do a hard reboot and log back in. What do you guys think? Can I get some feedback? Some sound? No? Hello? Did you guys all sign out?
Eugene, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, you did?
What kind of printer are you using and what kind of materials? What kind of printer are you using and what kind of materials? What kind of print?
What I'm using for my model simply using just regular any cubic resin. I'm using the soy-based one, so it's not very allergenic. And I'm printing that at 100 micron and getting really good model work with it. As far as the dental resins are concerned, so I'm using Dreve for the bases. I'm using GC for the printed teeth, crown and bridge material. And I'm using the NextDent, what do you call it? Custom tray material for the bases. But what I've also done is I've used like orthoclear resin from NextDent, and I've tinted that with pigments. The printers that I'm using is Frozen Sonic XL 4K printer, and I'm using a Frozen Sonic regular. I also have the Anycubic Photon that I showed you guys the very first one, but I don't usually use that one anymore. It still prints a fairly good resolution. It just takes a really long time to print something, you know. So that's the only reason I don't use it very often, because my Sonic can print something in the same resolution or better in third of the time, or even faster than it takes the Anycubic Photon. With these printers, there's what I generally recommend to people: either go low end or go high end. Somewhere in the middle doesn't really work too great, because they'll still kind of break down like the low end ones, but it's going to cost you a lot more to fix them. So if you're going to be dealing with something that needs a lot of precision, I would get something like an Asiga, like a DLP printer. It's going to be like a plug and play type of system that you don't have to do a lot of dialing in. But with these cheaper printers, because my biggest one is like $2,500. There can be issues with them. First of all, you have to dial them in. You have to dial in the resins, and every printer is a little different. And then they can have issues with like LCD screens and stuff like this. But being a technician and kind of being a little tech savvy, I think I should be able to fix some of these things fairly easily and just get them cleaned up and ready to go. But eventually, I think a couple of years down the line, I'll buy something like a DLP, like a higher end one. Hopefully that answers your question.
I guess that's a wrap for you, buddy.
That's a
We
wrap.
really appreciate you. Hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Let's give you a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Sorry about the program freezing up, but hopefully.
Hey, everybody, we have lunch out there, but before you leave, I want to give you one good announcement that tomorrow at 4 o'clock,